What if I told you that the most credible warning about alien life didn't come from a conspiracy theorist in a basement? It didn't come from a whistleblower posting on Reddit at 3 a.m. It came from one of the most respected astrophysicists on the planet. A man who has spent over 50 years staring at the night sky. And when he starts choosing his words very carefully, you should probably pay attention. In 2025, Neil deGrasse Tyson sat down for one of the most revealing conversations about UFOs, government disclosure, and the existence of alien life closet ever captured on camera. And in 2026, with the political and scientific landscape shifting faster than at any point in modern history, his words hit differently. So today, we're going to unpack everything he said. We're going to layer in what's actually happened since then. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand why the question isn't, do aliens exist? The question is, what happens to us when we finally have to admit it? Stay with me. Let's start with where we actually are right now. In early 2025, Trump made a public commitment to declassify UFO files that the government had been sitting on for decades. And almost immediately, former President Obama added fuel to the fire by openly stating on record that there are things in our skies that we cannot fully explain. Two former presidents, two public statements, one very uncomfortable question. Now, you might be thinking politicians say things for political reasons, and you'd be right to think that Neil deGrasse Tyson actually addressed this directly. He pointed out that if there really is a cover-up, the president would almost certainly be part of that cover-up. So a president promising disclosure is, at best, incomplete, and at worst, a controlled release designed to look like transparency without actually being transparent. What he said carries more weight than a political press conference. If they're insiders, if they're whistleblowers, those are the people I'm going to listen to. Not politicians, the people inside the machine who felt compelled to come out anyway. And here's where things got genuinely interesting in 2025 and into 2026. Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, publicly described UAPs performing maneuvers that defy our current understanding of physics. We're not talking about blurry lights. We're talking about craft, demonstrating rapid acceleration that would kill any human inside, speeds that exceed anything in our arsenal, and what the military calls transmedium travel, objects moving seamlessly from air to water to space with no transition. That's not a weather balloon. That's not swamp gas. That is a senior government official standing in front of cameras saying on record that something is out there and we don't know what it is. So what does Neil deGrasse Tyson actually believe? This is important because he's not a UFO denier and he's not a true believer. He occupies a position that very few people in public life are willing to hold: radical intellectual honesty. When asked directly, do aliens exist? He breaks it into two very different questions. And that distinction matters enormously. Question 1. Is there life somewhere else in the universe? On this, he is unambiguous. If you run the numbers, the age of the universe at roughly 13.8 billion years, the hundreds of billions of stars in our galaxy alone, and the estimated 1 trillion galaxies in the observable universe, the math becomes undeniable. Life on Earth began almost as fast as it possibly could have, within about 100 million years of the planet cooling enough to support it. That means for more than 90% of Earth's existence, life has been present. Apply that same logic to the cosmos, and the idea that we are alone becomes the truly extraordinary claim. He puts it simply, no one who has actually done the math is in denial that some form of alien life exists somewhere in this universe. That is not speculation, that is statistical reasoning from a trained scientist. Question 2. Have intelligent aliens visited Earth? And here, this is where Tyson gets fascinating rather than evasive. He introduces a concept he calls aliens of our ignorance. It's the modern version of what philosophers call God of the gaps, the historical human tendency to explain what we don't understand by pointing to something supernatural. Ancient civilizations saw lightning and called it Zeus. They saw plagues and called it divine punishment. They saw strange lights in the sky and pointed upward. Tyson's argument is that today's version of that same cognitive shortcut is aliens. See something you can't explain, aliens. Footage that looks strange, aliens. And his caution is not that aliens don't exist, it's that we shouldn't use alien as a psychological off-ramp from the harder work of actually investigating the unknown. Because here's the thing, in science, unexplained doesn't mean unexplainable. It means we haven't done the work yet. But, and this is crucial, he also acknowledges that once you strip away every explainable phenomenon, there remains a genuinely puzzling residual. Cases that aren't Venus, cases that aren't clouds, cases that aren't human error, cases that sit on the frontier between what we know and what we don't. And for a scientist, that frontier is exactly where the most important work gets done. Now, here's where this gets politically and institutionally messy. In 2025 and into 2026, the conversation around government disclosure became impossible to ignore. The UAP Disclosure Act, pressure from congressional hearings, whistleblower testimony under oath, all of it created a pressure cooker situation where the question wasn't really, will there be disclosure anymore? The question became, how much will they actually tell us? And Tyson's skepticism about the political class is worth sitting with. He makes the argument that if a cover-up exists at the governmental level, any president promising to reveal it is either genuinely uninformed or part of managing how that information gets released. History gives us reason to be cautious. Previous declassifications have often revealed not very much, or they've been framed in ways that generate more questions than answers while appearing to be acts of transparency. Think about what Rubio said, objects performing implausible maneuvers above sensitive government sites. That's a statement from a sitting Secretary of State, and yet the official response from government institutions has remained largely vague. The gap between what officials say in interviews and what gets formally declassified is enormous, and there's a reason for that gap. Some researchers have argued it comes down to two categories of motivation: genuine national security concern. If these objects represent an unknown technology, revealing what we know also reveals what we don't know, which is a vulnerability and institutional self-protection. Because if UAPs have been performing maneuvers over American military sites for decades and the military hasn't been able to intercept or explain them, that's not a comfortable admission to make publicly. Both of those motivations produce the same outcome: slow, carefully managed disclosure that gives people just enough to feel informed without actually informing them. Here's something Tyson said that doesn't get quoted enough, and I think it reframes this entire conversation. He drew a direct line between the original space race and everything happening right now. We didn't go to the moon because we were curious. We went because we were scared of the Soviet Union. Sputnik launched. Yuri Gagarin orbited Earth, and suddenly the most powerful nation in the world felt like it was losing the future. Kennedy's famous speech to Congress, the one that kicked off Apollo, was explicitly framed as a battle against communism. Show the world the path of freedom over the path of tyranny. When the Russians stopped competing for the moon, we stopped going. Only one scientist ever walked on the lunar surface. One. And that was the last mission. Now fast forward to today. China announced plans to put their own astronauts on the moon, and almost immediately the conversation in Washington shifted. Artemis, NASA's return to moon program, suddenly found bipartisan support. Trump launched it, Biden kept it, and now it's continuing into 2026. Tyson is absolutely blunt about this. The geopolitical forcing function is back. We don't talk about it that way because it sounds crass. We dress it up in the language of exploration and human achievement. But strip away the rhetoric and the mechanism is identical to 1961. Why does this matter for the UFO conversation? Because the same geopolitical logic applies. If an adversary or an unknown non-human intelligence appears to have capabilities we don't understand, the institutional incentive to investigate and to control the narrative around that investigation becomes enormous. The moon race wasn't just about going to space. It was about demonstrating technological and ideological supremacy. If UAP technology represents something genuinely beyond human capability, the race to understand it and the race to control what gets told to the public about it operates by exactly the same rules. And right now in 2026, with NASA's Artemis mission having recently completed its crewed test flight around the moon and preparations underway for an actual lunar landing, We are living inside that new race in real time. This is the part of the conversation that stays with me. Tyson was asked, if we ever make contact with an intelligent alien civilization, what should we do? And he didn't give a reassuring answer. He pointed to the most uncomfortable historical pattern in human civilization. What happens when a technologically advanced society meets a less advanced one? Every time in human history that a civilization with superior technology encountered one without it, the outcome for the less advanced society was catastrophic. Not necessarily because the advanced civilization was evil, sometimes it was even well intentioned, but the power differential was so enormous that the meeting was fundamentally destabilizing for the less advanced group. He's not saying aliens would necessarily be hostile. He's saying the assumption of benevolence is probably the most dangerous thing we could bring to a first contact scenario. And he introduces an idea that I think is genuinely haunting. The possibility that a civilization advanced enough to reach us would operate on value systems so different from ours that our concepts of friendship, threat, communication, none of those frameworks might even apply. We tend to imagine alien contact through human filters, the alien diplomat who wants to negotiate, the alien invader who wants our resources, the alien scientist who wants to study us. But what if the encounter is more like bacteria encountering a human? Not a conflict, not a partnership, just an incomprehensible difference in scale and cognition that makes our categories meaningless. That's not a comforting thought, but it might be the most honest one. And Tyson also flagged something closer to home, the proliferation of increasingly powerful technology in human hands. He described the possibility of a single individual, motivated by ideology rather than self-preservation, using advanced biological or AI tools to cause catastrophic damage. When Piers Morgan asked if the rest of the world could stop such a person, Tyson's answer was honest and quiet. I don't have a good answer for that. For one of the most brilliant scientific minds on the planet, that admission carries weight. So here's where we actually stand. In 2026, the UAP conversation has shifted from fringe curiosity to mainstream institutional concern. Congressional hearings have included testimony from military personnel and intelligence community insiders. The Department of Defense has acknowledged the existence of UAP task forces. Footage of objects performing maneuvers inconsistent with known human technology has been officially released and officially confirmed as real. The mainstream scientific community, represented by voices like Tyson, has moved from gentle skepticism to something closer to structured, a closet agnosticism. Not, this isn't real, but we don't yet have the methodology to properly investigate this. That's a meaningful shift. Neil deGrasse Tyson's forthcoming book, Take Me to Your Leader, frames itself as a primer for first contact, a guide for thinking clearly about how we would handle the discovery of alien intelligence, so that we don't arrive at that moment completely unprepared. The fact that one of the world's most famous scientists felt compelled to write that specific book at this specific moment tells you something. Meanwhile, Artemis 2 completed its crewed lunar flyby in early 2026, sending humans further into space than any person had traveled since the Apollo era. The next step, an actual lunar landing, is on the horizon, and China's own lunar ambitions have not slowed. The space race is real. The technology race is real. The information race, which includes control over what we know and don't know about what's in our skies, is very much real. Tyson's warning isn't dramatic, it's quiet, which somehow makes it louder. Run the math, do the science, don't fill your gaps with comfort stories. And whatever you do, do not arrive at a first contact scenario having never thought carefully about what that would actually mean. Here's the thing about Neil deGrasse Tyson that I think people miss. He doesn't reject the idea of alien life. He rejects lazy thinking about alien life. He rejects the reflexive leap from unexplained to extraterrestrial. Not because he's certain there's nothing out there, quite the opposite. He's cautious because the stakes are so high. Because if this is real, we should want to get it right. We should want rigorous investigation, not viral videos. We should want scientific consensus built on evidence, not political performances built on distraction. And yet he also acknowledges that there are things in our skies that the brightest minds in government and science have genuinely not been able to explain. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. Because a mystery genuinely acknowledged by honest, intelligent people is far more interesting and far more worth your attention than a mystery solved by a convenient narrative. So, where does that leave you? Maybe the aliens have already visited. Maybe those UAP maneuvers represent technology we don't understand. Maybe the government knows things that would fundamentally change how you see your place in the universe. Or maybe, and this is Tyson's point, the universe is so vast, so strange, so fundamentally beyond our intuitions that the truth is going to be weirder and more wonderful than any of our current guesses. Either way, one thing is certain, we are not done asking this question. And in 2026, maybe for the first time, the people in power aren't trying quite as hard to make us stop. That alone should make you very, very curious.